Hi, my name is Sam Saleh. I was born in Jordan. My parents both born in Jaffa, Palestine, which is directly south of Tel Aviv. Um, they both left in 1948 when the new government was installed. They went to the West Bank town of Abud, which is not too far from Jerusalem, but it is in the Palestinian West Bank. Eventually, my parents moved to Jordan, got married. I was born in Jordan. We came here. I was 5 years old. What's interesting is when I was very young, um, I don't necessarily remember telling anybody I was Palestinian. Whenever the subject came up, I was born in Jordan or I was an Arab. I think we used to say Arabian, even though that's really not a nationality. It's a language we spoke, of course. And really, I think as I just became closer to adulthood, that I realized that Palestine is a real thing. It's worth it's definitely worth keeping alive, especially as it became much more in the news. Unfortunately, for negative reasons most of the time, as to this day. Um, uh, just last year, I had an interesting interaction with a young man, and it kind of tells the story of where a lot of the understanding still is today. This gentleman was a physical therapist who was actually working with my mother after she had had a stay in the hospital. And very nice man. He was actually Filipino, very religious, Roman Catholic. He had mentioned to me that he was very interested in us because he had mentioned that just a couple of years before he had made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and how it's a trip he always looked forward to and was so glad that he went. He was really overcome with with the religious history that he was surrounded with there, and vowed to go back again. He was that impressed with it. So, with that, of course, I felt need to tell him the story how my parents were born right there. They were born in, very close. They've been to Jerusalem a million times. Um, and he said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "Well, 1948, the new government was installed in Israel, and the goal of the government was really try, not necessarily succeed, but to try to make Israel a religious country, a Jewish country for the Jewish people." And I said, with that, my parents were basically moved out to the West Bank, which is unfortunate because in near Tel Aviv, it was relatively westernized. So my parents were actually born with some decent amenities that we take for granted here, like water and electricity, and moved to the West Bank where neither was a common occurrence, at least clean water. So I told him that story, and he was kind of puzzled. He looked at me and he was surprised that what I just explained to him happened. He said, "But but you're Christians." So yeah, so I said, "No, no, that it was not I had to explain to him that really wasn't just Muslims that were removed, uh, but actually all Palestinians, all Arabs living in the now Jewish state of Israel. Um, so it taught me a couple of things right there. I should say it showed me a couple of things right there, that even though this young man had professed to being, just having just gone to Israel just a few years earlier and being overwhelmed with the history of it, he really didn't know the history of it. And another thing it showed me, and this goes to, I think, the negative press that you hear so often. In fact, maybe the only time you ever hear is in fact the negativity of goes on there. Is that somehow he had come to believe that it was that the Muslims, it was somehow their destiny, in fact, to be removed to another part of the land. Uh, so it again, nothing that completely shocked me because I'm certainly aware of what is on again what makes news and what doesn't. You know, poor children dying because they're just innocent bystanders. That hasn't always made news, but it's always happened. Um, People not being able to live. I mean, a place like Gaza is. I heard a reporter of 40 years from the New York Times yesterday say he's been there. And it's the saddest place on the face of the earth because it's basically 2 million people living in a poor ghetto, is what it is. Cramped, poor ghetto, no chance for much other than somehow leaving the country, literally doing whatever you can to go to Europe, to come to America, to maybe go south to Egypt, whatever you can do to get out. That's the only way you're ever going to find any happiness and try to become something other than what you can do there. So, like I say, it took me a while in my life before I realized that saying I was a Palestinian really was a necessary thing that people would understand. Um, and that's just about my story.